Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining me for this presentation. My name is Sharon Billy Duran. I work for Rockwell Automation in the control and visualization business. And in this presentation, I will be highlighting the features that are introduced in FactoryTalk View version 9. I will be focusing on FactoryTalk View Site Edition and FactoryTalk ViewPoint. And just so we're all on the same page, I'll cover where FactoryTalk View Site Edition and FactoryTalk ViewPoint fit in our visualization portfolio. So starting off, we have Machine Edition. That is our machine level HMI that runs on the panels. Next, we have FactoryTalk View Site Edition, and that runs on a PC. So it could be a standalone PC or a distributed PC. So if you have a larger application amongst many different PCs with clients connected to it, that's all Site Edition. And then we have ViewPoint. ViewPoint is our web-based HMI that extends your existing application so you can view it from a web browser, either from a desktop or a mobile device. And as I mentioned, in this presentation, I'll be focusing on FactoryTalk View Site Edition and FactoryTalk ViewPoint. So 9.0 is a major release for us, with a lot of exciting capabilities added to the toolbox. We have some new features and also enhancements to existing features. So the list is here. You can pause this presentation. You can take a screenshot and look over it later. I also have slides for all of these features, and I'd be happy to go through the slides, but I'd prefer to spend most of our time in the software live. So I'll be going through these features using a demo application that is new for our 9.0 release. It is installed with the product as a default application. So this walks you through everything that I'm walking through in this presentation. There are instructions on how to set it up. You get the controller application, and then there's an answer ID that helps you walk through the features and explain some of the things. So everything that I'm doing here, once you install 9.0 yourself, you can do it at home. So without further ado, let me switch over to my demo image, because that's what you're here for. So right now you're looking at the runtime client of the demo application. So each highlighted feature that I'll be covering can be accessed from this menu bar up here. And we will start with recipe management. So a recipe is a collection of tags and values that can be downloaded to or uploaded from the control system all at once. This can be triggered by an event, or it can be initiated by an operator. We have 3 new commands that are added to the system in this release. We call it Recipe Pro Download, Recipe Pro Edit, and Recipe Pro Upload. So I'm going to start with the editor now. So Recipe Pro is what our recipe management feature is called. When you bring up the editor, you can bring up this editor either from the design environment, so FactoryTalk View Studio, or from a running client. You can see that I have these recipe files. It is really nothing more than a list of ingredients, a list of tags, and a list of values. And so I have recipe 1 here and recipe 2. So if we look at the contents of recipe 2, they're all 22s. So for the purposes of a demo, that's easy to follow. So let's load that to the system so you can see what it looks like. So I have recipe 2, and I'm going to download that guy. So once it's downloaded, you can see that all of the new inputs now are 22. So let me go back to the editor, and I'm going to create a new one on the fly. So let me duplicate this one. I will call it recipe 3. And let me change all these. Just to be consistent. to 33. And I'll save that. Let me go back here and I'll load recipe 3. And there we see recipe 3. The contents of recipe 3 have been loaded. There's also the idea of upload. So if I have a running system and it's running perfectly, and I just want to save those values, let's pretend here that I have 1, 2, 3, 3. So let's pretend these values, these are the perfectly running system. I want to upload this guy. So I'm going to upload this to recipe 3. So now this is the new contents of recipe 3. When I bring up the editor and I look at the contents of recipe 3, I can see that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 is now part of that recipe file. So some other things that you can do here in the editor, if I click this refresh button, it will query the system and tell me what the current values are for these tags. Just so you can see the tags here. It'll tell me what the current values are. If editing recipes inside this editor is not your cup of tea, you can import and export them to CSV files. So I can export existing recipes to CSV files, edit them with an editing package of my choice. You can even create them with a database, and then you can import them back into the system from CSV format. And then once they become part of the system, I can edit them here, I can download them, I can upload them. So that's a highlight of the new recipe functionality. I think one major thing to note is that if you have a View32 application that uses Recipe Pro recipes, when you convert your View32 application to FactoryTalk View SE, we will take those recipes and convert them into this new Recipe Pro format. So everything that you have defined in View32 with Recipe Pro will automatically come over. The format is a little bit different. So you see here the format here is a list of tags with list of values. And in View32, the format is a little bit different, but we do that conversion for you. So all of your View32 recipes will be listed here. Moving right along, next I'll go to Trend. This is a new trend control that we call Trend Pro. Trend Pro supports live data, the FactoryTalk View data logs, and also supports FactoryTalk historian tags. Some cool features about this is that a lot of the operator controls are very accessible and it's full functionality. So some of the things that I can do is I can create ad hoc trends by navigating through the system of live data and selecting tags. So let's find one. Once I select it, I can just drag it over to the trend. Oop, I already have that one. Pick a different one. There we go. So I've added a new trend to the screen just by selecting it here in live data and dragging it over. I can also browse through existing data logs. So this is a data log that I have defined in View SE. And if I have historian as part of the system, which in this demo I do not, but if you do have historian, you can browse historian tags as well. So some features that you can manipulate while the trend is running is right now I have the pens stacked. I can show you how they're unstacked. So I can overlay trends on top of one another. I can add cursors. So I can compare what values are at certain time periods. So that's the cursor for the x-axis. I can also add a cursor for the y-axis. I can also do statistics. So I can compare the statistics for a time period. I can look across all time periods, or for a time period defined only by the cursors themselves. If I do a right click on the trend, I can create a new time period. So I can have a historical pen. So that could be something like a golden curve. So that's what the trend should look like, and then compare that against the real-time trend. I can also look at the actual data that I have, and I can export this. So I can export this to Excel, to CSV file. So there's a lot of features here that I encourage you to explore once you get the software for yourself. I think you'll be pleased with the amount of things that you can do in one single control. Next, we'll move on to support for Logic's extended properties. So what this means is if you are using control logics and you define tags in your control system, they have a name, they have a description, they have units, and they have a min-max, or if it's a Boolean, they have a state description. So we have access now to that in the HMI. So by simply typing in the extension of that extended property, I can view that on the HMI screen. And what that means is development becomes a lot easier because everything is defined in the controller. So the min-max value, the description, the engineering units can all be defined in one place. I don't have to create another copy in the HMI. So if it ever gets updated, the HMI picks it up automatically. So these tag properties are reflected here. This also is a great tool for global objects. So I see here the screen that has 6 different tanks on there. If I go to View Studio and I look at this screen, this is what the screen looks like in View Studio. You can see there's very little text, actual text on the screen. So I can create this global object pretty much 100% generically. And then at runtime, all of this gets filled in with data directly from the controller. And it's not separate string tags that I've defined in the controller. This is just defined once. I can use these extended properties to fill in dynamically the keypad. So this title bar here, these min-max values, those are all coming from the controller. And if you have to have an application with language switching, the extended properties also support that, which is really important. So if I switch languages, as long as the languages exist in the controller, so I switch to Spanish here, switch to Chinese here, you can see that it also supports Unicode characters. The normal language switch command in the HMI will also trigger the switch for the Logic's extended properties. So this is really powerful because you don't have to translate the HMI. You only have to define that information once and then translate it in the controller. So moving on to Hyperlink Animation. Hyperlink Animation is cool because now I can create a link to external documents or external websites. So this can be used for troubleshooting, for manuals, for any type of information the operator may need to access from on a web browser. So an example here, my drive has faulted. I can link to the fault codes. I can link to the manual. And then what's important here, and I'll show you later, is that these hyperlinks also translate to ViewPoint. So in our web-based extension product, the hyperlinks will automatically come over, and then you're already in the web browser. So it's a great tool to be able to access external data. Next, we'll cover some changes in data displays, so enhancements to how we display data. The first is dynamic decimal places. This gives you the ability to dynamically define the number of decimal places for a numeric input or a numeric display. So right now I have 1 decimal place. Let me change that to 2. So you can see that the fields have updated. Go for 3. And then you'll see this field here, it has a field length of 5. So I'm not getting 3 decimal places. I'll get as many decimal places as my field length will support. And the cool thing about this is that it also supports global objects. So this number of decimal places can be a tag. And so this display here is actually a global object. And it also supports parameter passing. So I'm going to call up a pop-up here that also displays the dynamic decimal places. So what this means is you can create a faceplate that's reusable for different data types, and you don't have to have multiple display fields with multiple configurations of decimal places. You can just have one. Displaying data in scientific notation, that's the second display down here. For values that are very large, always very large, or always very small, it helps operators to be able to read the data if it's always going to be in scientific notation. And so there's a setting now for numeric displays and also numeric inputs that you can always use scientific notation. So moving on to security functions. So security functions allow you to define access to items based on a user's group or a user's location. So there are new functions that are introduced, that we've introduced over the past couple releases, that checks for a user's security group or the computer's group. And so this is an example of animation that is done based on the user's group. So right now I'm logged in as lab user, and lab user doesn't have access to either area A or area B. But now I'm going to log in as Andrew. And just for the purposes of the demo, we have a button that logs Andrew in automatically. And so now Andrew has access to area A. And so I can see that area A is activated, area B is not. And then I'm going to log Andrew out and log in Barbara. And you'll see that these buttons for area B are enabled. And then now area A is disabled. And so where this becomes powerful is very similar to the dynamic decimal places and the way that you can reuse the buttons for someone else, or the display fields for different data types. I can add these functions to a faceplate and pass the group dynamically and then do the evaluation. So I can create this faceplate once, pump on, pump off, and then based on the user who is calling that faceplate, it'll set the visibility for whether or not the user can do something with these buttons. So alarming, we've added some new functions to help visualize what's going on in the system. So we have some new functions: in alarm shelved, normal and shelved, disabled, suppressed. So we have some functions that you can do when you have an alarm. You can shelve it. That's sort of like a snooze bar. So for, like, say, 20 minutes, the alarm goes away. But you may want to see how many alarms are actually suppressed. So now we have a function that you can use to animate and display on the screen how many alarms are suppressed, how many are shelved, and how many are disabled. So let's shelve some of these guys so I can show you. I'm going to shelve this for 5 minutes. And then we should see that that should turn to 1. Let me shelve another one. And that count should go up to 2. Now let me suppress one. And then that count goes to 2. And so if you want to actually see the list of all the alarms, so that we have the Alarm Explorer, one of these, there it is. So the Alarm Explorer, you can call from the summary if you have that button enabled. And this shows you the state of all of the alarms that you have configured and what their current status is. So I can see the ones that I have suppressed and the ones that I have shelved. Another enhancement is with alarm history. So with the alarm history, when I show the active alarms, or I can show they're not active in the history, but when I show the alarms in the history, they are now color-coded as to their current priority level. And this helps you at a glance to see everything in the history. I can see the urgent priority. I can see high priority. I can see low priority. But this helps me see at a glance the contents of my history log. So moving on to controller communications. If you are using Rockwell Automation controllers, which I hope you are, if you are using Rockwell Automation controllers, you now have the ability to inhibit the data communications either from the design environment, so this is the shortcut configuration, or from the HMI screen. So what this means is if you are changing out equipment for maintenance, or there's a problem with the network, you can tell the HMI, hey, stop talking to this controller. And then what happens is the data on the HMI, it looks like it's wireframed, but actually what the system is doing is that it's not asking the controller for data anymore. So you're saving your diagnostics logs from a bunch of errors, and you're keeping your system stable because the system knows that this controller is not there, so stop asking for things. So if I navigate around the application, I can see that it's wireframed. So the operator knows that there's a problem, but the system is not constantly trying to ask, hey, controller, give me the data. Hey, controller, give me the data. I can just as easily enable it again. And then within seconds, the data comes back just like it was there before. So this is really powerful if you want to keep your HMI running, but your system either has issues or you have legitimate maintenance needs that you want to keep your HMI running, but you're just taking down a part of the system at a time. And our last little thing to highlight here in this sample application is the ability to print the screen to PDF. So if you have a print driver that prints to PDF, you could have done this before, but now we give you a PDF driver built in. So let's say I want to print my entire screen. And save it to the desktop. you can see this PDF appeared right here. And if I open it, I get my entire screen. That's a fun little addition. Finally, I will move on to mobility and show ViewPoint. So for those of you who may not be so familiar with ViewPoint, ViewPoint, as I mentioned before, is our web-based extension. So it takes an existing application that you create using FactoryTalk View Studio. So it's the same way you would create an application anyway. And I have the ability to select graphic displays. So in this demo application, I have all of these screens listed. I can choose to enable them for the web. And then you see there's another choice here for mobile enable. And I'll show you what that means here in a second. But when I select them for web enabled, what that means is it goes through a publishing process and then makes them available for the web. So let me jump over here to my client, my web client. And remember what I said about these mobile enable. So with ViewPoint Mobile, you get a built-in navigation. So all of the screens that I have published are listed here. And only the ones, or let's say all of the screens that I have published are available via the web app. But the displays listed here in the navigation are only the ones that I have selected for mobile enable. So what this means is this navigation gives the operator a direct link to all of the screens that you may want him or her to access. But you can still publish other screens that you may want them to access from the screen itself, like a pop-up. If you're passing parameters to a screen, you don't want the operator to access that screen directly. You want them to access it from a main display. So let me show you that here. So if I select this display, this is our display that we looked at before. When I call this pop-up, I still want to publish this pop-up, but I only want somebody to access it from this display. And so this navigation is built in. So everything that is selected here in Mobile Enable gets listed here. Another very cool addition that we've added to the ViewPoint Mobile website is the alarm display. So this is our mobile alarm display. This is dynamically responsive to the device. So here you can say that this is my web browser. Let's pretend this is a tablet. If I resize this, say to a phone, you can see that the display adapts to the size of the device. And this is a native HTML view of the alarm list. So going back to the client real quick, just to show you the relation. So all of the alarms listed here are the same alarms that are listed here, only optimized for your mobile device. And so I'll make this bigger just for the demo so you can see. So if I select an alarm, I get the alarm details. So it's all of the information of the alarm. This is just like I would on this client. So I can see the same information here. And I now have the ability to acknowledge and shelve from ViewPoint. So this is a pretty big feature. So I can acknowledge. And then that acknowledgement, the username, and that message gets logged to the history. So in the history, I know that a mobile user has acknowledged the alarm, and I have their comment. I can also shelve an alarm from ViewPoint as well. So the permissions to do this are controlled in FactoryTalk Security. So it's done by a user group. So in ViewPoint, I can restrict the ability to acknowledge and shelve just based on the user's group, just like I would in a FactoryTalk View client. But this is really powerful because users can walk around with their phones and their tablets, see the active alarm list, and actually do something about them. So that concludes my demo portion. I'll go back to slides here real quick, because what I want to show you is that there is a ViewPoint demo online. So don't take my word for it. Feel free to navigate to this URL or scan this QR code with your own device and check out ViewPoint for yourself. You can see the alarm display, or you can see the mobile alarm site, and you can see how you can have a list of displays. That list of displays is the architecture of your application. So if you have multiple areas, you can see that screens are kept in that area hierarchy. So check it out. In this release, we've also picked up support for Windows 10 and Server 2016. And we also support for data logs and alarms and events history, SQL Server 2014 and SQL Server 2016. And for everybody who wants to know all of the versions of all of the services that are listed, here you go. FactoryTalk services, CPR9, SR9, and then all of the related services underneath. So I hope I was able to give you a overview, a highlight, if you will, of the new features that we're introducing in 9.0. I hope you're excited about the features just like we are. I hope you download it as soon as you can and you check it out. And please check out what's new with FactoryTalk View SE and FactoryTalk ViewPoint by going to rockwellsoftware.com. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Have a great day.